Hi, this is the last Google Hangout. Basically, this is the last event of this MOOC. Well, there's going to be one more thing tomorrow. I'm going to record the last video on my own, but that's probably not going to be as much fun as now talking to the good people you see here with me, with whom I'm going to talk. People are starting to ask me now whether there's going to be a second run. Is there going to be more? Maybe can we have a even more after this? Is there going to be a sequel to this course? Is there going to be, so we call it now among ourselves the Son of Miracles, and we are actually hoping to do that. We want to do it, so we want to just add more modules to this, but this takes time, and also it takes money, and we don't have that as well. Time we don't have, maybe well, we will, but money is the thing. So we're now looking for money, and we will maybe come back to you about that. Maybe even tomorrow I can say a few more things about that already. Okay, so that being said, we can now start the discussion. So like the previous time, there were many people asking questions on the forum, and we, which is our team, we selected some of these questions. It turns out they're all being asked by nice young people this time. Welcome to 4 of you, and I'm going to ask all 4 of you now first to introduce yourself. First, Rujul.
Okay, I'm Rujul. I'm in India right now. I speak 2 languages, Marathi and English, and I speak a bit of Hindi too. And I've never done any MOOCs before, but I'm interested in linguistics, interested in language, everything to do with language, and I thought this might be interesting, which is why I joined, and I'm loving it so far. Like, it's over, but I loved it.
What can you say? What makes you feel interested in languages and linguistics? What do you find particularly interesting?
I like the way in which you can connect things from one language to another. Like, I like all the logic behind it. Like, there is quite a bit of putting things together, and the way it works, and all the different connections from language to language. There is some sort of similarity, and that logic is what I like.
Right. Right. So it's a bit. If you just look at as languages at first, it looks like it's a big mess, and then you see there's a lot of system within the languages and connecting them. Yeah, that's what I like to. Yeah. And then Fatima, how about you?
Okay, I am Fatima. I live in Nicaragua, and well, I speak 2 languages. Spanish is my mother tongue, and I learned English mostly by playing video games, and then watching movies and stuff. This is not my first book, but I am very interested in languages as well. So yeah, it is.
Yes, and you just told me that you are actually planning to maybe do a master in linguistics or something language related.
Yes, that's something I would love to do. Actually, recently from the first hangout that you did, I learned about the sign language in Nicaragua. It turns out that one of my students of writing techniques, which is a class that I give, 2 of my students are know this language. So I am going, this is Saturday, I am going with them so they can teach me a little, and I became interested in that, you know. I didn't know about that. So I'm going to research a little bit about that. I'm interested in the language that is speak here in Nicaragua, how it came to be. I want to know more about it, about the historical conditions, and about how language, well, shapes the way you think, you know.
Well, yeah, that's right. So if you are in Nicaragua, so you were saying you heard about this Nicaraguan sign language, which is indeed it's a world famous because it's probably the youngest language in the world, and I've seen videos about it. Probably you can find them on the internet too, of people speaking it, and then you can even see the different generations. So you see, like 30 years ago, people were very clumsy, making very clumsy movements, and now you see the newest generations. It's a complete language, and they really use it like that. It's very interesting. Okay, and then we have Indri.
Hi, my name is Indran. I am in Missouri in the United States. I'm going to be graduating in just a few days with a bachelor's in anthropology. Let's see, as far as languages go, I've studied Spanish a pretty long time, but my real passion for the last year has been the Arabic language. So I'm going to be spending the rest of the year on that.
Can you say what you find particularly fascinating about Arabic?
It's just much different than English. It just sounds beautiful to me. People ask me that often, like when I was studying in Morocco last summer, and I couldn't exactly put my finger on why it appeals to me, but I guess it's a difficult thing to answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's aesthetics, right? How can you say that you find something you find beautiful or interesting? Yeah, well, so are you going to study it there where you are in Missouri now, or are you planning?
No, in the capital of Jordan, so in the Middle East.
Oh, I see. So you're really going to learn it on the spot, so to say.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that. And our last, you're going to get at least a little bit closer to our last guest, Idil. Well, still, Jordan is not really next to Turkey, but it's not very far either, is it?
So, hi, my name is Idil, and I'm 20 years old. I'm currently studying translation and interpreting, and this is my third year. Next year, I'll graduate, and I'm planning to have a master's degree on linguistics and cognitive science.
Nice. And where do you do this master's degree? Which university? You have to switch on your microphone. We don't hear you now.
Yeah, so I haven't really decided where to do my master's degree, but I'm planning Europe, hopefully. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, come to Holland. Come to Leiden. What can I say? Okay, so let's go now to the questions you each asked, and we will do it again in the same order, not for any specific reason, but let's do it in that order anyway. So, Rujul.
Okay, so my question was about endangered languages. So when a language is endangered, linguists try to save it. So linguists try to document the language so that there will be some kind of record of the language. So when you're documenting a language, maybe you might want to write down the grammar, but there's no way you can cover the entire vocabulary of the language because you can't count how many words there are. In order for you to make a dictionary, you'd have to master the language, and we don't have that much time with a lot of languages. So what would be the most effective way to document a language?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And actually, so it's true for the vocabulary, but it's maybe even more true for the grammar. I mean, the point is, I know that in the course we said that you cannot really count the number of words in a language, but still, because you can always make new words and things like that, but you can still, there are still, let's say, if you have the first 10,000 words, then that covers a lot of ground. So I think for an average language, if you know the first 5,000 words, you already can read something like 90% of all text. So if you know 10,000 words, you can read almost everything already. And the problem with grammar is not that it's infinite, but that there's many things we still just don't know about it. There's always in every language all these little tiny rules and little tiny exceptions, and we just don't know it. So for Dutch, my language, there's now just a grammar has appeared, only about the syntax, which is 7 volumes. Like this, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages, and still it says almost on every page, well, we still really don't know this and that. So that's one of the best studied languages in the world, because for some reason there's a lot of linguists around here, and still there's many things we don't know. Now, if you take one of these dying languages, well, there's typically only one person working on it, so there's not much they can do. I think what you have to do is you have to record as much as you can and write as much grammar as you can. There is, so one thing I want to point you, everybody, all of you, to, is that there is actually going to be a MOOC in July not on Coursera, not by Leiden, but on edX and by the University of Adelaide in Australia, which is about dying languages. Now, I don't know anything about that MOOC. I mean, I haven't seen anything, I don't know, but I know that the people who present it are very renowned experts on exactly this, on exactly language documentation. So maybe if you're interested in this kind of thing, the one thing to do is to go there and follow that particular MOOC. I'm sure it's going to be good. Now, actually, I think in the, if I remember correctly, on the forum, you also asked about revitalization of languages, right?
Yeah, I actually asked whether when you document a language, can it be revived later, like by studying those texts or by studying a lot of literature? Can you bring it back into casual use or daily communication?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is another topic which I'm sure is going to be brought up in this other MOOC. And I really like it also because it's actually something which is debated. I think somewhere in the reading material in the last module something is being said about it. So there's one example actually of a language which has been really revitalized, which has come to life again, and that's Hebrew. So that's an example of a language which, well, it died out. Actually, it died out first like many centuries ago, to a large extent. So people could read the Bible, read other sacred texts, maybe cite them, recite them, but not speak in them. Now I cannot speak in English. And then at some point, people decided they wanted to have this as their language again. And they did it, right? So it's now completely alive. It's just as alive as any other language is. It's also the only real example of this we have ever. There have been other attempts. So there's also in Europe there have been minority languages which died out or almost died out and which people are trying to revitalize. But it's usually difficult. And I also have to say that the Hebrew which is spoken now, today, is different from biblical Hebrew. Well, that's normal, you could say, because the biblical Hebrew is the language of, let's say, 2,000 years ago. But it's also really different, probably because of this revitalization. So it was, people started speaking it. Those people usually had European languages as their background, and you can still find some traces of that European grammar in those languages, just because we don't know, right? We don't know. We don't really know how somebody spoke 500 years ago for any language. So it's impossible to completely revive a language in the way it was spoken 500 years ago. You would have to, I don't know if this, well, I just mentioned this grammar, 7-volume grammar syntax. If you study it, I think if you study that and you never listen to any speaker of this language, but you study this very carefully and you learn many words by heart, I think you will still not speak like a native speaker. It's just, that's actually, in my view, it's one of the miracles of human language is this, that you work and work, you write enormous books, and still you haven't written down everything a native speaker just knows, just has in their head. Yeah. Okay, before I get too emotional, let's move on to Fatima.
Okay, so my question was on the use of English as the lingua franca of scientific community. I know that it can be beneficial. For example, having one single language favors communication among people of different origins. And I think that the language chosen for that, it's just given by the different let me see, conditions, historical, political, economical conditions. But let's say the language chosen for the task would need, I think, simple, easy to learn and reproduce structural elements such as verb tenses and gender signifiers. For example, English uses it, so it is a signifier, gender signifier, and in not like German or Spanish, as we saw in one of the
Fatima, it's very difficult to understand you. So I think I will phrase the question which I think you have asked, right? I can understand most of it, but I also know what you want to say. So so your question is about the use of English as a scientific. It starts with the use of English as a language for the lingua, which is the lingua franca of the scientific community. We're also using it here now. Okay, and you are wondering about whether or not. Okay, it has a clear advantage to have any kind of lingua franca to begin with, because now we can understand each other. But there could also be problems with that, namely, if languages give you a different point of view, if different languages give you different points of view, wouldn't it be beneficial to have speak more like the same language and then like that? So that's let me try to answer that. So on the use of English as a scientific language, I think there's a lot of I suppose there's a lot of discussion about this everywhere in the world, right? So we are living linguistically, we're living in very interesting times. It connects to Rujul's question. We're living in interesting times, and at the same time threatening times, because what is happening is that we get big languages expanding and many smaller languages dying. So I think I say it somewhere probably in the course material, but it's usually claimed that we now speak 6,000, 7,000 different languages, and by the end of the century that will be reduced to maybe 600. So many languages are dying and other languages are expanding. And one of the languages being the biggest one of all, namely English. So all over the world people are learning English and then doing certain kinds of communication, like scientific communication, in this language. Which is a good thing. Is it also a bad thing? To be honest, I don't know. I think about it one way one day, and the next day I think about it some other way. I don't know. Maybe it's a. So I think the argument for saying it's a bad thing is saying, indeed, it forces us all to think in exactly the same way. It's not just even maybe the language, but that it's all one big community around the world, that we're all communicating to each other. It means we're all influencing each other, and we're all starting to think more and more alike. So we're trying to solve the same problems, all of them more or less in the same way. But maybe we are on the wrong track. Right? So it would be maybe better if there would be other people thinking in some completely different ways, completely unconnected to us, and thinking about these problems in a different way. And those different kinds of views competing. For me, that's the main thing which is being lost by having one language. Does that answer more or less what you asked, Fatima?
Yes, actually that's what happens to me. Some days I feel it is better to have one single language. Some days I feel like we're losing a lot. But I think that the question goes back to, well, the question is, or another question maybe, that are there languages that are more suitable for certain purposes than others? For example, a language that's like a poetic language. Now was a poetic language. But there are some languages that are maybe better for other type of ideas.
Well, there's many people around the world who believe that their language is the best language for, I don't know, rational thought or something like that, right? Or expressing the truth the way it really is. So the French in Europe, the French have always been famous for that. The French have been famous for thinking that their language is the most logical one. Why? Because if you think about, I don't know, the girl eats fish. Well, in French is SVO word order, but they think this is the most logical because if you think about the girl eats fish, you first think about the girl, then you think about eating, and then you think about the fish. And they don't realize that they think like that because this is what their language gives them. So I think the only way in which this is true, that languages are more suitable for something than for other things, is when it's about really technological things. So English is more suitable for talking about science, many sciences. Why? Because because people always talk about sciences in English, so they have all these words available and stuff. So scientists, also in linguistics, so also so also in linguistics, some people claim that it would be easier to talk English than some other language. Why? Because they know all these words in English. But yeah, I'm not sure you can say that this is now a property of English, right? So it's just that so we can change all these other languages, add those words, and then you can talk just as easily in those other languages. So I think if a language is more suitable for doing something than some other language, it's usually just because that language happens to have some words for this phenomenon. And that's then just because the people in that language talk about that phenomenon more often. So it's never a matter of principle. That's, I think, what I need to say. So I don't think there is, in principle, you can talk about everything imaginable, everything human in every language, especially if you train yourself a little bit. And that actually, I think it would be nice because, so I'm going to change the order a little bit because Idil's question connects to this, right? So maybe Idil, you can give your point of view or your question.
Yeah, okay. So my question is about feeling different, like feeling a different person when you're speaking a different language. I've heard this from many other people. I know this from my own experience, that for instance, when I'm speaking Turkish and I'm expressing my feelings, I feel quite limited. But when I'm speaking English and expressing my feelings, I feel more open and I can find more accurate words for my feelings. So I wanted to ask you, is it because there are some cultural differences between those languages that limits us or lets us speak like that? Or is it something psychological, maybe that we feel like someone different and that makes us speak more like differently than normally we do?
Yeah. Yes, there was just last week there was some research which came out, I think American, I don't remember. Or maybe German, or American and German. So in any case, it was about people speaking German and German speakers and English speakers, and they were watching. So this was not yet about deep feelings. Okay, this was about something very simple. Research is usually not about very deep feelings. This was about something very simple. So you would see a video clip, very short video clip, of a man walking. And in the distance there would be a car in the direction of where the man was walking. And there was another video where you would see a man arrive at that car. And people were asked to say whether they thought those videos looked the same. And in German, if you express this situation in German, if you would ask somebody to make a sentence about it, about the first clip, they would say, he's walking towards the car, much more often than if you say the same thing in English. So in English, people could just as well say, he is walking. But in German, for some reason, I don't know what, but for some reason you feel uncomfortable with saying that. You always try to add the goal. Now, it turned out so that particular difference between these two languages played a role also in this experiment. The people didn't have to say anything, only do these two clips look the same. They didn't have to say what's happening, they just had to say that. But still, German speakers felt that these two clips were more similar, where the man arrived at the car and where the man was walking towards the car, than English speakers. So that maybe suggests that even if you look at something very simple and superficial, the way you look at it might be influenced by how you would express it in your language. There's more to be said about it, but there is research about that. But about these feelings, I think there's many people in the world who have that exactly the same experience as you, namely, it's more difficult to talk about feelings in your own language, because that's what you're saying, right? So in your native Turkish, it's more difficult to express your feelings than in some other language. And the fact that it's so many people in so many different cultures who have that feeling, I think probably tells us that this is not about languages, it's more about what you call psychology. So it's about the psychology. It's I don't know, if you have to say I love you in your native language, that's deeper. Those words are more connected. You learn those words when you were a child, so they are associated in your mind, in your brain, they're associated to all kinds of situations. If you say them in a foreign language, those connections, like just the connections in your brain, I think that's the way I think about it in any case. There are fewer of those connections. It's kind of cleaner, it's more abstract. All words are a little bit more abstract, they're less attached to everything you have experienced before. So that gives you that effect that if you say it in your own language, it's more difficult to say it because it is. But it also means that if somebody says it in their own language, you can take it more seriously than when they say it in a foreign language, right? Do you have any experience, any kind of? Do you remember any kind of situation where you have not "I love you," but any other kind of feeling which you found more?
Yeah, well, the thing is, in Turkish, when we say "I'm sorry," this means a strong apologize. In Turkish, we don't usually say a lot of "I'm sorry." It's a big thing for us to like understand, and it's like we're threatening our positive phase like very much. But for instance, in English, I've noticed that most of the time people use "I'm sorry." It's not a big deal for them. But for us to say "I'm sorry" all the time is, I don't know, but like so in society, it's kind of look like you're weak. I mean, I know this is wrong for me, but this is there's a kind of perception like this. So this is this is the first thing that popped into my mind.
Yeah, interesting. Right. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you say "I'm sorry" in Turkish, you only say I'm sorry when you have done something really bad, right? So okay, I kill your brother, then maybe I say I'm sorry, but not for something small. But in English, maybe yeah. So in English, you say I'm sorry all the time for everything. I think English speakers would say, especially if you're Canadian. But so even within the English-speaking world, there are differences there. Yeah, but that means so it's a kind of circle then. It becomes circular because okay, now you feel I'm not going to say I'm sorry because this is really small and it makes it really big. I'm a Turkish speaker. It makes it really big if I say I'm sorry. So it means nobody ever says I'm sorry when it's for something small. So it reinforces this feeling that you can only say it when it's big. But I'm not sure that this means that you don't. It's actually a different kind. So the Turkish word for I'm sorry is not the equivalent for the English I'm sorry, but it's more the equivalent of I'm really, really sorry, or so I want to die, or something like that, right? So but then you can say, well, okay, so in Turkish you cannot say the small I'm sorry, just small apology, you cannot do it. Well, can't you? You cannot let the other person know that this was not a big deal. You can do it in some way, right? Let the person know it's not a big deal, but I feel a little bit bad about it. Can you?
Yeah, like you have to put extra words to tell, like, well, when you say I'm sorry for a small thing, it's actually equivalent to excuse me, I've done something wrong, but not I'm sorry. And for like many situations, there are different types of sorries in Turkey. So when you say, like, when you did something wrong and you say I'm sorry, it's different than when you say, for instance, your friend's pet died and you said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So they're completely different from each other. But still, with the word I'm sorry, with the sentence I'm sorry, it's I know it differs from person to person, but like I said, for instance, when you said I love you, it's also the same thing. I think the Turkish meaning of I love you is much more stronger than the English one, but there are also examples of vice versa. So that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So but one of the important things you said, for me at least, is that you say, okay, I can say all those things, I can say them in Turkish, but I need more words. And that, I think, so I think that's generally the case. So you can say everything, every single thing in every language. You can translate at some level, let's say at the semantic level at least, you can translate everything everybody says into every language, but in some languages they're going to need a lot of words to explain things, because maybe people are not used to talking about them. And then feelings, because feelings are generally human, so people tend to have very similar feelings around the world, as far as I know. But for technological things, again, that would be definitely the case. Okay, and well, we now did ladies first, so Indrin is last.
Okay, so my question was about that course material where we had a graph where the y-axis was like the position of the tongue in someone's mouth over different generations on x-axis. So like they quantified pronunciation. And I was wondering whether all of phonetics can be boiled down to just numbers, and then beyond that, whether all of linguistics can be, like every linguistic variable can be quantified, or if not, which ones can't.
What do you think?
I mean, in anthropology, there's certainly variables that can't be quantified. Although there's like social science, like a scale of 1 to 10, like the Likert scale, where you say my motivation is a 7 today, or like, so maybe you can, but just not give the full picture. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so. In this kind of social linguistic studies, like Labov did and still does, and this was just one example, but in most of the examples, that is actually about phonetics, and there's a good reason for that, and that is that phonetics is indeed easier to quantify. And I think the reason for that, in turn, is that phonetics is the area where linguistics touches most closely on physics. And phonetics, to some extent, is actually a kind of physics. So you study physical and physiological phenomena. So because you study the language outside of the mind, and when it's already airways and things like that. So you can measure. We know, because physicists have found that out. You can measure airwaves, so we can do that. But now take semantics. Well, semantics would be word meaning. So that part of semantics, that's very difficult to quantify, because we just don't know. So which is more? So we take horse, the meaning of horse, and the meaning of cow. Okay, is that more different? Are they more different than horse and sheep? I don't know. I have no idea. You would have to. Yeah, I don't even know what to count. Right. So that's very difficult to quantify, and then let alone pragmatics. Right? So how we make a recording of somebody, take our informant videos. How polite are they on a scale of 1 to 25? How polite is this person? Yeah, it's we cannot really quantify that. So it's basic. So the answer is, the only thing which is really easily quantifiable is phonetics. For all the others, you have to, because for all the others you have to do some kind of linguistic analysis, and that's already a little bit subjective. Right? So that makes it already more difficult to quantify. So if people are real hardcore phoneticians, they will say we are the only real scientists because we are the only ones who do the real measuring. And so that's not something I think which Labov would say, but he would still, that's a reason why he prefers that kind of stuff. This doesn't mean, of course, that you cannot quantify at all, but you have to do certain steps, right? So you could so we talked about a little bit about word order, and then we talked about, well, of course, that was just a limited kind of subset of things, right? So the SVO or SOV, or etc., adjective, noun, or noun, adjective, etc., preposition, noun, or noun, preposition. And okay, well, you can say these are 4 different parameters. We can count them, right? So that's a quantification. It's a very simple quantification. And then we can start wondering, well, where's the adverb, and where's this, and where's that, and we can make it more complicated. So you can get some kind of measure there. And that's what people sometimes do. Yeah. Yeah.
Just like one quick follow-up question.
Sure.
In the last Hangout, you talked about how you don't speak English with an American accent. You have a Dutch accent. And like, if phonetics is quantifiable, do you think that you can say my accent is 50% further, or the way I pronounce this vowel at least is 50% further than the way someone from Turkey pronounced it, or something like that? Is there a function that like could create your accent out of the English? American, sorry.
Yes, that's a good question. Well, yeah, there are people who are doing that. So they make, for instance, they do that for things like accent, for dialects, right? So you are in America, so you make a map of America, and what they do is they just take words. So you take one word, you take man, and you have people pronounce it everywhere, and you compare them. So you can measure, indeed, you can measure all kinds of things. Where in the mouth do you pronounce the A? What do you do with M and N? Well, they're not very variable probably, but in any case, so you can measure those things. And then they make very nicely colored maps where the colors denote how similar and how different dialects are, with all kinds of shades in between, etc. So you can definitely do it. Now, I'm not a hardcore phonetician. My question to those kinds of people is, okay, you can make this, so you can make everything objective, so you can measure the vowels, you can measure the consonants, but there's still something you have to decide, and that's going to be subjective, I think, and this is how important is each and every one of those measures. You don't do one overall measure, but you measure different things. How important are those, right? Is it more important that people pronounce the vowels similarly, or that they pronounce the consonants similarly? Is it more important that they have the intonation right, or that they have the stress right, or something like that? So, so you still have to make certain kinds of decisions. If you wouldn't, then actually one of the problems in the first module would be solved. Namely, you could say, we could now start measuring accents, we could measure dialects, and then we could say, well, if there's a difference of 252, then this stops being a dialect and becomes a language. Right? You could say that. But we don't. We don't do that. Because that measure would still be, to some extent arbitrary. So in phonetics you can measure many more things. At the end of the day, you still take certain kinds of decisions about what you think is important and not important. I think that is a point. Okay. Does any of you have more questions? Any of you 4? No. Yes, you, Fatima.
Yes, when you were answering the question, you said something about translating. You know, this idea of translating, for example, I'm sorry, to Turkish to English. But then you said that in English, the Turkish I'm sorry, it would be I'm very, very, very sorry. So you would need more words to translate an idea, no? Right? So does that is that a negative thing? You know, that you need more words to say something in one language than in another language?
Well, what do you think? Is it a negative thing?
No, I don't think so. I think that it is it's necessary, because you don't have word to express an idea like you do in another language, for example. But I don't think it is negative. Why would it be?
Yeah, well, I think let's say suppose you have to talk about something all the time, but it can become cumbersome if then you have to express this in all detail every single time. It's easier to have just one word. I think that's what you could say, no?
Yes, it's easier. That's true. It's easier. But not negative, right?
No, I was trying to play the devil's advocate here. I mean, I agree with you. It's not, it's not a big deal. You can even say it's nicer if you have to use more words, because then you can use all these nice words all the time. You can speak more, something like that. Have any questions? All right. I'm talking now to my assistant people.
A lot of people are saying that they're very sorry that this is the last time they're going to hear you talk to the camera. But one is saying that maybe German was the first lingua franca for science.
Well, I'm not. No, I don't. So if there's somebody saying that German was the first lingua franca for science, that person was definitely wrong, it seems to me, because in Europe, in any case, very clearly the first lingua franca for science was Latin. So German, I don't know why that person is saying that, but there were many other questions coming in actually before. There was one question I liked, for instance, by Isabel Janes, I think she's called, who asked why there are irregular verbs. I find that a fascinating question as well. Irregular verbs or anything irregular, right? Why do we have irregularities in languages? She also asked something else, which I'm very sorry I cannot answer now. Maybe she asked how Roberta, the informant, would tell what happens if Maria came with money or her friend paid the check. Well, I don't have the acting skills to give answer to that question, so I keep it to the first one on the irregular verbs. So it's true, I'm not sure that all languages have irregular verbs, but all languages, I think everywhere where you look, languages have something irregular. Well, all languages with a certain class of exceptions. So maybe if you go to Nicaraguan Sign Language, you will find an exception there. So the kind of exception I mean is young, new languages. They very often, the way they grow is they're called Creole languages. It's languages where people come into contact. They really don't speak each other's language at all, but they're forced to live together. So the prototypical case in history was in slave trade. So the slaves had to talk to their masters. They didn't have any language in common. A new language arises, and those new languages very often don't have exceptions. But then when they grow older, again, they get exceptions. And the reason for that, I think, is it's something you always wonder about. I remember when I was a kid at school, this is maybe how I even got into linguistics. You have to learn a foreign language, and then you start wondering, why do we have to learn by heart all these stupid things? Why do I have to learn by heart all these exceptions? So it's difficult. They're difficult when you're old, when you're above a certain age. They start becoming difficult. It's like when you're older than 12, 13, something like that, they start becoming difficult. For young children, they're no problem at all. So these irregularities are usually things from the past. Irregular verbs in most languages are an example of that. You have a system of inflecting the verb, and then there was an old system, and then some verbs still use that old system. Okay, for young children, this is no problem. They just learn it like that. They pick up all these new things, and that's why languages have them. Maybe they also have them because it's the most frequent verbs. In the frequent verbs, it's just easier to immediately hear what's going on. And with these irregularities, you immediately hear that. You don't have a suffix, a stem and a suffix, but usually these two things are kind of combined. So you hear the whole thing in one go. So it might even have a little advantage, but it definitely has no disadvantage, apparently. Because children are so extremely good in learning languages, including all of their irregularities. Okay. Well, so Einat, I don't know whether you heard her, but you guys heard her, but she said that there were many people now commenting saying that it's so sad that this is the last event. I have to say, I also think it's very sad. I didn't know before what was going to happen, but I thought it was extremely great. I really liked it. I really liked the whole experience. I'm going to miss it. I will have time for doing other MOOCs myself, or following a MOOC myself or something. I'm definitely going to miss it. We're going to come back, but this is really now the last moment, so I find it very difficult to say goodbye, at least in English. Well, I find it very difficult to say goodbye in any language. How do we say goodbye in your languages? Let's do that. Well, and then, or in the language of your choice. And let's, again, follow our order, and then we close it off. Rujul.
Okay, so we don't say goodbye. We say see you later. It's like punha bhetu. We say see you later.
Thank you. Fatima.
Yes, in Spanish it would be adiós, but I would also prefer to use see you later, which is hasta luego.
And, well, Indrid.
I think in Arabic you could say ila liqa or ma'asalama.
Right. Thank you. And finally, Idil.
Oops.
I didn't hear what you said.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. In Turkish we say hoşça kal for goodbye, and to say see you later we say görüşürüz.
Okay. Well, in Dutch we say tot ziens. So that's what I say to you. Tot ziens.